and make sure I have my slide deck queued up wherever it went. There it is. All right. That's it, I think. Here we go. So loosely titled "Finding Your Story," searching maybe is the better subheading to this session, but really we're just helping you to blow the dust off your experiences and see what shining ember glows from the story circle and from your own thoughts and ideas you're bringing into the workshop. And between now and next week, putting some of those thoughts down, getting them outside of our head and somewhere else into our being, and hopefully they will emerge somewhere in a way that you can voice them, talk about them, read a script, read a poem, go off the cuff. But the idea is, just sort of seeing some things that we should leave to the side for now, and sort of take a path that seems doable in this workshop. I always have different quotes to lead into the story circle, this idea, well, what is the story circle mostly about? And it really is mostly about listening. Joe Lambert has another great quote I sometimes use, which is, listening is our core technology. I just love that idea of technology is right down to the basic and analog of listening. But I like the Jeanette Winterson, and she's a great writer. One of my favorites. So everything in writing begins with language, and I said everything about storytelling begins with language, and language begins with listening. The idea that listening is at the heart of what we do. And someone that maybe wasn't a great listener and still is learning in that capacity, this part of listening is letting go of biases and our own powers and such. You really have to be open to the possibilities. And when you do this work, and I'm sure everybody is doing similar kind of work in their profession or in their lived lives, that phones being the thing that distracts. I mean, I think there's something about, so there's kind of a cue, if you've got a phone close by, push it out of sight. There's this idea, and I think it's proven out in some of the research, that having a phone right next to you means you're not fully attentive to who's speaking. You're waiting for the text to come through, or looking for the time when you can quickly check your Twitter or your Facebook. So turn it over so it's not distracted, push it away, put it in a drawer, take it to another room. Anyways, this idea that really there's a kind of letting go and opening up the possibilities. I find that to be somewhat in the idea of eliminate the power structures and start to believe and put faith in what you hear, and seeking truth in the person's stories that they're telling. That's all this slide really is saying, at least to me. And there's a couple of, I find, really good quotes from Christine Baldwin, and a great book by Ted Chamberlain, and one of my favorite titles of all time, If This Is Your Land, Where Are Your Stories? So, story circle ground rules. And I'm sure there's,
how many of y'all have engaged in some sort of a story circle before?
Great question.
Anybody?
Or sharing exercise.
Okay. I was skeptical when when I first, even before the pandemic, was a couple of the online classes that I taught. I was like, how on earth is a story circle going to work when we're not actually sitting in a circle in a room together? And I will say that it works amazingly well, basically because of these ground rules, because we are, actively listening to each other and holding this space for each other.
Great segue into the ground rules. Thanks, Marie. So we want everyone to be feeling that they're being listened to. We're going to meet, in our breakout groups for about an hour, and then we'll take a break afterwards. Excuse me. And so we don't want to extend the time too much, because sometimes too much time is problematic in the sense of we don't know what to say, or it feels that we have to fill that space. So we're going to give each storyteller about 10 to 12 minutes to talk about the story ideas, something they're thinking of doing and making into a digital story. And Kat, sorry that, this is maybe sprung on you, but I'm sure you will find something to bring into your breakout group. And then we want to just make sure we hear everything. So attentive listening for the duration of the storyteller, uncovering what they want to uncover. And then always start with an appreciative comment. It's just this idea that you're paying attention, not with a critical eye, an editor's brain, but and we've suspended our own judgments, that there's something in what people are saying, even the fact that people are being brave and saying something and bringing something to our attention. So always start with appreciative comment. And then if you have feedback, questions, and Marie and I will sort of facilitate that. We don't want everyone jumping in. So certainly we want to make sure that the storyteller is maybe directing us to the kind of feedback they want. So it's always questions. Is there anything you want from the group? And a lot of times people say, do you think it's too long? Did you get this part of it? Was it understandable? Or sometimes they say, no, it's all open, for whatever feedback is coming my way. So, but we want to make sure that the storyteller sort of manages and controls the kind of feedback they're looking for. But if you do have feedback, of course, reflective questions are always good, in the sense that if there's some clarity, you're looking for clarity, dates, times, places that weren't clear to you. Those are really great questions. All stories need some kind of solid context, at least in some part, so people can kind of attach themselves to something. But if you do have some ideas around structure or production, or a thought came to your mind about a photograph or sound or anything outside of what was said, we like to frame it if it were my story. And that way the storyteller can sort of step outside of it for a moment, allow the person to come in and pretend it's their story and say, okay, I'm up for listening to what Rob has to think if it was his story. And they can sort of detach a little bit and just listen to the feedback that way. So sometimes people will say, for my story, I might consider taking that middle part and starting with that, right? But we're not here to edit and make structural changes. We're just getting these stories just on the table, just to celebrate, some kind of early seed planting. Manage assertiveness, step back, step up. A little different in online than in person, but want to hear from as many people. I mean, always the idea that still waters run deep, and that if the person that is listening and maybe not speaking is holding a lot of really, really good information and feedback within them. So, but also if, I know sometimes that the uncomfortableness of just silence, and, sometimes there's some silence. We need to just hold the thought and hold what we just heard close, and then sort of enter into the space for feedback. So just be aware if you're someone that, like me, that wants to jump in and help, that you step back and just let some time and think about what it is you're about to step into. Always go ahead, Marie.
I was just going to say, and a reminder too, that this is, we are limited by time. It's just the practicality of the class has a time limit on it. The amount of time that we have for each person in the story circle has a time limit on it. But that's not the end. If you don't get to make your comment, you can always jot it down, reach out to the storyteller, say, hey, I had some other questions for you. Would you like to hear them? And then the agency is still with the storyteller to say yes or no, but it just sort of ensures that everybody gets equity of time, and also that we keep things moving.
Right.
So if you find that you're talking a lot, maybe, I invite you to step back a little bit. And if you haven't said anything yet, I invite you to come forward and, share what your thoughts might be or your questions might be, whether or not it's in the chat or if you unmic.
Great. And on that, just keeping the discussion on topic of the story and the storyteller, not taking us down tangents of our own life experience based on the story that the storyteller's just told. You'll all get a chance to talk about something in your own experiences to make a story from. So that also keeps the time going. But it happens sometimes because our stories all connect somewhere. There's all these connective tissues that we want to sort of elaborate on, but we want to make sure the discussion stays for each storyteller in their time in the story circle. And so part of that time management too is just signaling affirmation. So the jazz hands, or some people will just be nodding their heads. There's some way that visually, but the jazz hands is good. It's very visible that if something is said that you agree, right? Or you hadn't thought about, but yeah, that's great. Or you were about to say the same thing, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just that visual signal will allow the storyteller to see it on the screen and say, that resonated with a few people. There was 3 or 4 jazz hands around this one point that I was making in my story sharing. So that also just allows us not to repeat, like that person said, let me say it my way. So that's the way that keeps things going smoothly. That's the 6 points that we have. Does anyone have variations of that or something that feels missing? We know that sometimes the things that are said in the story circle never get into the story. There is a sort of safety and a sense of honoring the story circle, that what's said in the story circle stays in the story circle, and just the trust that builds. Sometimes we need to sort of navigate around some experiences before we land into our story. We want to be attentive to that, but also want to just not judge that and not sort of like take that out of the story circle. So that I want to say that. But is there anything that people want to add? Or is it ready to go? All right. And while people are just looking at these ground rules, I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. I have everyone.
And so while Rob's doing that, I'll just take a moment to reiterate that, the point of the story circle is to move you forward in your stories. And you are not going to have all of the answers at the end of today. And that is okay. That is where you are supposed to be. But you should have a better idea of an aspect of your story that maybe you hadn't thought to explore before. Or maybe you'll have some confirmation that the direction that you're going is the direction that you should keep going. And of course, after the fact too, because a lot of times we'll get a lot of information in a story circle and we'll be like, whoa, and then we just need a minute to kind of digest it. And Rob and I are available too, of course, after class. If you've got any questions for us, certainly feel free to reach out.
I'm just, Suzanne here.
Does anybody have any questions before we break up into a couple of groups?
So I've got, do I have 7? Why do I have, let me just get the other 1, 2.
And
did someone just drop out? I thought we had, oh, right. Ashley is not here today. Okay. All right.
And I'll just remind everybody too that, oh gosh, wait, what was I gonna say? I'll remind myself to remind y'all. I don't know. It'll come back to me. I'll send it. Maria.
Okay.
So I just had a question with regards to the time limit for each person. Does that start right at the outset of the breakout session? Or at what point do we turn on the clock?
Oh, we'll control the clocks for you.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about that. And we'll give a 2-minute warning, which is just a reminder to that we only have a couple more minutes for like one last question, one last talking through it or whatever. This is what I was going to say. This time is yours as the storyteller to use as you see fit, your 10, 12 minutes, whatever it is. If you do not want any feedback, you don't have to have any feedback. If you have, like Rob said, if you've got specific questions, if you want to read a script that you wrote, if you wrote a script and you actually don't want to read it, but you just want to kind of talk it out, you can do that. If you have an image that you're thinking about using, you can describe the image and we can ask questions around that. Whatever is going to help you, you know your story better than us, and we are here to help you uncover it.
And we'll be doing this again next week too. So you'll take the feedback and and make adjustments, think about your story more between this week and next week, and we'll come back into these breakout rooms for a check-in with each other that way too. So yeah, and Marie and I will just text on the background if it looks like there's a rich discussion and people need more time. This is really more important than some of the other things we're going to end up with today. We can always catch those up. So, you know, the story circle is certainly the place where we want our attention and the energies to be. So we'll just see. And if people need a little bit more extra time, we will grant that. Obviously, we need to be out of here at the top of the second hour. So ready? All right, I'm going to open the rooms, and we do that weird thing where we disappear and then reappear. So see you on the other side. And I'm going to stop that recording.